Good morning, YouTube. This is Gabaguy. Um, I wanted to do one more video related to the presuppositional apologists, and specifically on reflections on the conversation that I had about a week ago with ArcanE Logos. um, so we started the conversation talking about tu quoque, and just to give you a little bit of background, if you hadn't seen that conversation already, ArcanE had a conversation before my conversation with him, with JD Kane, and ArcanE made a video declaring that JD Kane had used a tu quoque fallacy in saying that basically the conversation went that ArcanE was saying, well, atheists can't solve the problem of hard solipsism, and J.D. Kane said, that's true, but it's true for theists as well, because nobody can solve the problem of hard solipsism, hence the term problem, essentially. So I made a video responding to ArcanE's original video, and I gave a counterexample where I talked about if someone said to you, well, you have a duty to develop your talents and abilities, and among those talents and abilities is the ability to flap your arms and fly. And since you can't flap your arms to fly, that's not an ability you've developed, then you are guilty and not living a moral life. And the person who was receiving that accusation said, I'm not morally culpable for that because I can't fly and you can't fly in that way either. So no humans are morally culpable for that. ArcanE objected by saying, well, these are not the same. It's a false equivocation, the argument that I presented and the argument that J.D. Kane presented. So I wanted to revisit this and give a comparison, a side-by-side comparison. In order for J.D. Kane's argument to be fallacious, it has to be an invalid form. And so ArcanE is claiming in their conversation, I can solve the problem of hard solipsism. And JD's objection is, no, you can't. That's not humanly possible. And my counterexample is, I can fly by flapping my arms, and the person objecting says, no, you can't. That's not humanly possible. The form is exactly the same. The only thing that is different is the content. And so ArcanE's claim that that these are not comparable is invalid because they are almost identical in form. I also just did want to note that JD's wording when he objected was different. He did say, I can't solve hard solipsism and you can't either, but he clarified later. So if ArcanE really is pressing this matter that J.D. Kane committed a fallacy just by stating it in that way, he's not really genuinely interested in the true meaning of or implications of J.D. Kane's statement. He's just interested in scoring points and trying to make himself look good. I wanted to also say that flapping arms. So ArcanE's saying that flapping arms is not the same as hard solipsism and things, but you can convert these arguments into syllogisms, which are deductive arguments. So if the form is valid and the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. So no humans can solve the problem of hard solipsism. You and I are human, therefore neither you nor I can solve the problem of hard solipsism. This is a very, very standard, basic, valid deductive argument. This is logic 101. This is probably like your first day in a class of logic. You would learn a syllogism like this. And I threw out another example, or I'm throwing this out now. No human is omniscient. You and I are human. Neither you nor I are omniscient, or you and I are not omniscient. It's essentially the same. So these are both valid forms. This is not fallacious in any way, shape, or form. Now, if the premises are not true, then yeah, it's possible that the conclusion is false. But I mean, what do you have to work with here? You know, either ArcanE can complain and say that he's not human, or premise one, that he's saying that some humans can solve the problem of hard solipsism. Okay, that's fine. But like these other situations with arms flapping or omniscience, the burden of proof is then on you to demonstrate how you can solve that problem. And it's very evident that ArcanE just doesn't understand the very basics of logical argumentation and structure. This is kind of redundant, this slide. Just in order to legitimately claim any of this, ArcanE has to show that these arguments are different in form than JD's argument. And I've already stated these things. I'm sorry. Yeah, and so until you can demonstrate how the claim that no humans can solve the problem of hard solipsism, until you can show that that is substantively different in form than these other argument examples that I've given, then really you need to stop throwing out tu quoque, because you're not using it right. That's all I've got to say on that. Another issue that came up related to this tu quoque fallacy, because ArcanE didn't agree with me, he refused to move forward to talk about other subjects, and insisted that we have complete agreement on this issue of whether or not J.D. Kane had made committed a fallacy in his objection. Really, this is just a means of manipulating and controlling the conversation, and I don't think ArcanE would do this in any other situation. You know, does he have to have complete agreement on a subject when he's at work and discussing work topics? Because, you know, you have to have agreement on how did he say it? You know, the foundations of discussion and reason. And he was saying, if I couldn't see the problems with J.D. Kane's statements, then you know, we couldn't go on anywhere else in conversation or talk about anything else. And another example would be believers. For example, with baptism, um, does he insist that they agree on every single point of theology before he has any kind of conversation with believers? You know, if ArcanE, for example, believed that infant baptism is not scriptural, and from uh, a theological doctrinal perspective, where scripture is foundational to doctrines, I think his case would be stronger than someone that said, they believed in infant baptism. Um, but I strongly suspect that he's able to have conversations with other believers, and move past some of these side issues, without insisting that they have 100% agreement on every doctrinal or theological facet, in order to have any kind of constructive conversation at all. And really, this just serves as one, that he's trying to make himself look good again, and also to safeguard himself from exposing his beliefs and assertions from any kind of probing or inquiry. It took a long time to kind of shift around that obstacle. I was finally able to say, well, can I at least ask some questions of you, because of the reason that I had initially requested that conversation with ArcanE was to ask about presuppositional apologetics. And the only reason that I can come up with for him avoiding this was that he's really just pretending to be able to know these things. Every single time I asked ArcanE how did he receive divine revelation, he dodged and would not respond to the question. And I think he's really, in the end, trying to conceal the fact that there are serious problems with the theistic solution to hard solipsism. The reason for that is it's ultimately dependent upon our fallible senses and reasoning to perceive the supposed revelation from the deity. So I wanted to present a couple of kind of perspectives that will hopefully illustrate the serious problems with any kind of attempt to address the problem of solipsism with divine revelation from some deity. So anytime you have an all-powerful deity, that deity has unlimited potential for deceiving our senses. There's no means of discerning the truth of what we are perceiving. And no claim made by that deity, even if he says, I can only tell the truth, could be independently verified, because, again, we are limited to what we can see, hear, smell, touch, and what's the other one? See, hear, touch, smell, feel. That's all of them. And taste. Sorry, I did feel and touch. Anyhow, the five senses. That's all we can perceive the world with, and then we interpret that and understand it with our reasoning. The only way around that is if you were made omniscient yourself. So those are the problems with just any generic deity. When it becomes kind of worse when we look at the specific God of the Bible, Yahweh. So the presuppositionalists claim, well, we can perceive that Yahweh is good. We know that he's good. And we can trust that we can trust our senses because he's revealed it to us when we read the Bible. Well, reading the Bible has its own problems. It's perceiving this message through our senses, which, as we've already said, we could just be a brain in a vat, that the deity is deceiving and putting this reality, making it appear before us when it's not really there. The Bible tells us that God is good and cannot lie to us. That just begs the question, in the same way as just any generic deity. Is your God good? Yes, he is, because he says so. And then looking at the Bible, the God of the Bible is clearly not good. He is jealous and cruel and makes arbitrary decisions about judgments, and he allows for things like slavery, genocide, and hell. Oops, that's supposed to say etc. But just a really lousy deity and immoral and unjust. And the presuppositionalists won't do a Bible study with believers or non-believers because they don't want to have to answer all of these questions. And they know that the God of the Bible is really indefensible unless you presuppose that he's good. Well, presupposing that someone is good is not a justifiable position, no matter who it is. Another kind of defense of the concept of Yahweh being good is looking at the creation or the world. They'll say, well, that God created the world and it was good. Well, we can perceive the world with our senses, so that there again, we're the only means that we have to observe the world is through our senses. The world is really pretty terrible. Childhood cancer, starvation, natural disasters, and then the deity that apparently made the world and the universe with an old appearance, and Seitan Bruggencate will say this, and other presuppositionalists as well. But when we examine it with our senses and apply our reasoning and things, it has a very old appearance, but he says it's young in the Bible, or at least that's what the Bible would indicate. If you use the timeline that literal biblical interpretation would give. And there are also people who cannot trust their senses. If we've all been made in God's image, and that's one of the things that ArcanE Logos told me, that we can know that we can trust our senses because we've been made in God's image. Again, appealing back to the Bible, and that revelation from God that came through our fallible senses. Why are there so many people who are made in ways, and they cannot trust their senses because they have things wrong with their brains or with their sensory apparatus, and they have hallucinations and see and hear things that aren't really there. And ArcanE acknowledges that those people exist. Do they have a revelation from Yahweh that tells them that they can trust their senses? If so, that revelation is wrong. And if not, why would Yahweh, not give everybody sensory perception and reason so that they can know things absolutely? I mean, that's what that's what the bottom claim is that we can all know things absolutely because we can trust our senses and reasoning. That's false. And lastly, and this is just kind of another generic, how could a non-material deity interact with our material world? You know, the idea that this non-material being makes an appearance or conveys some message to us. How does the material and the immaterial connect? Please provide us some kind of explanation as to how that happens. The solution that I proposed in this discussion with ArcanE Logos, and I went in much greater detail and depth into my position than ArcanE would allow for with his own position. But I proposed that I have a naturalistic, materialistic solution to the problem of hard solipsism using what I termed a transmigdala. And I would like to further flesh out this concept of the naturalistic or materialistic solipsistic solution. The transmigdala is a material substance or structure in the human brain with properties that enable those individuals who possess it to perceive things in such a way that they can know that their senses and reasoning can be trusted, and they can know things absolutely. So my question to ArcanE and the other presuppositional apologists then, by this definition, if some substance like this defined in this way existed, could it not transmit to us information so that we could know things absolutely? This is a substance that can do that, and it exists, and so I mean, you would have to say that yes, by definition, this could, by definition, provide us with the power to know things absolutely. And the proof that it exists is that if the transmigdala did not exist, your worldview would be reduced to absurdity. That's proof number one. You might have to resort to claiming that an invisible deity is telling you things in some way, which is absurd. The other proof that the transmigdala exists is that it's material, and so we can test it and point to it and measure it and things. It's there. So one of the big strengths that this naturalistic explanation has over the theistic model is that the transmigdala is not a conscious actor. It is not it has no volition of its own, and it has no capacity to deceive, and it has no motivation to do that. So we don't have to worry about a deceiver. It just is, just like you wouldn't worry that a chair is trying to deceive you. It has no intention. Also, everyone knows that there's no invisible deity telling them things. They know that they perceive things, and that they can know things absolutely using the transmigdala. These presuppositional apologists deny the truth because they are joking, and they think that it's funny, but in the end they know that it's true. So my challenge to any of the presuppositional apologists, and I'll do a call out to ArcanE Logos, to Scythen-Bruggencate, the Bible-thumping wingnut, Matthew 4:19. Who else? Ronnie, or True Talk, or True Empiricism, however you want to identify yourself. And any of the others. Veckel, you've been seeming to head down this path as well. It's absurd what you're claiming, and I guess you think it's a funny joke, but it's time to put the joke aside and admit that you know that there is no God, and that you know things using the transmigdala. You're welcome to show me where my argument fails, and thanks everyone for watching. Check out my other videos and my blog, run.blogspot.com, and have a good day.